Welcome back to Whispers at Night. Can't sleep? Curl up and listen. Tonight we're in Appalachia, where Halloween isn't a holiday, it's a warning. 7 true tales, whispered from hollers and old coal roads, told by the folks who lived them. If you're new, subscribe and join our little night crew. Tap like and share if the chill finds you. Rain on the window, hush in the room. Ready? Let's begin. I hadn't talked to my cousin in months when he started blowing up my phone in early October 2022. Come out for Lantern Vigil, he kept saying. It's different here. He wouldn't explain what it was, some mix of bonfires, candles, and keeping watch, whatever that meant. I figured it was just a small-town Halloween thing with extra steps. Also, I hadn't seen him since his dad's funeral, and I didn't have plans, so I threw a duffel in the Subaru and left Richmond after lunch. You don't really find Larkspur Hollow on a map. You slide off the highway, past 2 gas stations pretending to be open, and then the pavement gives up. The last 30 minutes were pale gravel and tight switchbacks. Faded signs warned something. Maybe no outlet, maybe don't. Reception died before the hills got serious. By the time I reached the hollow, the light was already going thin and blue. My cousin, his name's Silas, not Rowan, rented the last house on the bend where the road sneaks back into spruce. 6 or 7 places clung to the hillside like they'd been set down crooked and never fixed. Smoke rose in slow lines, and everywhere. On porches, fence posts, windowsills. Glass lanterns with real candles flickered soft yellow. Not store-bought plastic. Real glass, real wax. People were still setting them out as I parked. Some houses had 3. One yard had a dozen in perfect gaps, like someone was measuring the light. Silas came out grinning like I'd flown in from overseas. "You made it," he said, clapping my shoulder. He wore a flannel I'd never seen, sleeves rolled. He walked me inside like I belonged there. The place was simple and clean. 1 story, draft around the windows, wide couch that could pull out. Chili simmered on the stove. A few photos of his folks stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a trout. I dropped my bag and cracked a beer. He started right in, jittery like he had too much coffee. "Tonight, you stay near the lights," he said. "If you go out, you walk where it's lit. Don't step past it." "Not once." He didn't smile when he said it. Just before the sun slid behind the ridge, a knock came. A kid stood there, 11, 12 maybe, with a crate of small jar candles. She handed Silas 3 without a word. He set one on the stoop, one in the front window, one on the fence post. The girl looked up at me. "Keep yours lit till morning," she said. "If it goes out, something can come in." She turned and walked away. No drama, no wink. Just facts, full dark pulled down fast. The whole road glowed like a landing strip, soft yellow dots guiding a bend of black. A few kids in homemade costumes drifted between porches, careful and quiet. No doorbells, no loud packs of teenagers, just the sound of someone's boots on a step and wind slipping through the trees. Silas crashed early. 2 bowls of chili and a third of a bottle of bourbon knocked him out with the TV on low. I wasn't tired. The drive had wired me up and the quiet pressed hard. Around 10:30, I stepped outside for a smoke. The cold had that clean sting that bites your nose. The jar candle on the stoop burned steady. For a minute, it was almost nice. The smell of wood smoke, the far hum of the creek, lantern light pooling on gravel. Then the world went still. Not quiet, still. No bugs, no breeze. The trees at the end of the lane stopped moving like someone pressed pause. Gravel crunched. Footsteps, slow and heavy, steady as a metronome. I leaned out over the rail and looked left down the curve. A person walked alone. No costume, no flashlight. Long coat, wrong for the cold. Their gait was off. Not drunk, not injured exactly, but a half beat out of time. Like the hips and knees weren't on the same page. They weren't looking at the houses. They weren't looking anywhere. They were just coming. "Hey," I called, lifting my phone for light. "You all right?" They didn't flinch. I took 2 steps off the porch. The light from our jar met the next lantern, and the next after that, a loose chain of yellow. 20 feet out, I saw the last one. Beyond it, nothing. The road fell into black, and the trees swallowed their own edges. At the edge where the light ended, another figure stood, still, waiting. So now there were 2, one walking with that wrong. Patient swing, one posted where the darkness started. The moving one didn't deviate, didn't check windows, didn't wobble. It came to the last pool of light and stopped on the line. Both of them turned and looked at me the same second. The one closest tilted its head like a dog hearing a whistle. Only it can hear. That was enough. I ran. Full sprint, half slide, toe of my shoe skidding on loose stone. I hit the steps hard and slammed the door. The glass rattled. The couch shook. Silas shot upright like a spring uncoiled. "You went past the light?" he whispered, voice already small. I nodded, bent over, hands on knees, lungs burning. He didn't swear. He didn't ask what I'd seen. He just dragged the couch across the door and dropped flat behind it. "Don't talk," he said. "Don't move, we froze." 1 minute, then 2. The porch boards creaked. A slow complaint under weight. Another step. Another. Our candle on the stoop guttered once, twice, and went out like someone pinched it. Silas whispered something into his sleeve. Words under breath, no rhythm I knew. He didn't look at me. He didn't blink. The knob turned. Soft metal against metal. A careful test. Once. Again. It stilled. Time stretched thin. My heartbeat got loud enough to hear through wood. Far down the road, a dog barked once and stopped. The air shifted. Leaves ticked against each other like fingers. Somewhere a wind chime remembered what it was for. The stillness loosened. Like gravity came back in pieces. Silas lit a new match with hands that didn't shake and touched it to another jar. He set the candle by the door. The light pushed a small circle into the room. "They don't cross the light," he said, barely above breath. "What are they?" I asked. He shook his head. "They're not who they were. Old folks say it's why this place kept that name. Lantern Vigil, not trick or treat. Something showed up once. We kept the lights and it didn't come in. So we keep them, all of us. Every house. Every year. What happens if you step past it?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer in my bones. "You're open," he said. "That's all there is." We sat behind the couch until the TV blue-screened, and the clock said 3:12 and then 4:31, and then the edges of the window turned from black to metal gray. I didn't sleep. My cigarette burned down untouched in the ashtray outside, cold and useless beside a dead wick in a glass jar. When the ridge finally let the morning through, the lanterns looked ordinary again, just jars and glass, wax gone soft, wicks curled into commas. The road had footprints where mine had scrambled, and nothing where theirs had stood. The girl came by at 8 with her crate and traded us out for fresh candles like this was the mail. "Keep them going tonight," she said. Not as a warning, just as a thing people do. Silas made coffee and handed me a mug. He looked older in daylight, like he hadn't slept right in years. "You'll head out after lunch," he said quietly, not as a question. "Yeah," I said. "I think I will." I drove back the way I came, gravel, then patchy pavement, then the wide, clean comfort of the highway. Reception flared to life and my phone jittered with all the nothing I'd missed. I could have called someone and said, "You won't believe this." But I didn't. The words felt like they'd go sour once they left my mouth. That night in Richmond, I put a candle on my windowsill and watched the flame catch and hold. It didn't mean anything there. It shouldn't have. Still, when it burned low, I cupped my hand and sheltered it until the wick found more light. Tess had been saying I needed air, not city air, mountain air. 2 nights, she told me. You'll remember how to sleep. So on October 29th, 2023, I threw a duffel in the car and drove east out of Roanoke toward Laurel Fork, West Virginia. Service dropped before the state line. By the time I turned off onto a dirt lane, the width of a pickup, the radio was just hiss and the trees were close enough to brush the mirrors. Her mom's place sat at the end. Small porch, slumped roof, wood smoke in the cold. I hadn't been there since a funeral a decade ago. The fences were falling into the hillside now. A couple of trucks had turned back into rust. We ate stew and cornbread at the kitchen table and drank cheap red from coffee mugs. I was settling when Tess said, "Coat." For what? "Trick or treat. You're 32. Candy doesn't check IDs. She tossed me a pillowcase and grinned. We started at dusk. The ridge took the sun like a door closing. Most places were dark, porches with no bulbs, curtains stapled down. But here and there a window glowed. Not LED bright, lamp and candlelight. Old folks answered. They were surprised, then pleased. One woman gave us fudge that tasted like brown sugar and butter. A man in a ripped flannel handed over popcorn balls and wax paper. We said thank you a dozen times and meant it. The road narrowed into a one-lane track. I slowed. "That's our turnaround," Tess pointed ahead. A small, unsteady yellow hung in the trees. "One more," she said. "He's different." "Who is he?" "You'll see." It got colder on that stretch. Sound went thin. The air smelled like wet leaf and creosote, like the space under a train bridge. The light turned out to be a lantern. Real glass, dirty, swinging a little from a nail over a crooked porch. The house was taller than its bones could handle. 2 stories leaned toward each other like they were tired. No pumpkins, no plastic spiders, just the lantern. Under it stood a man in a dark wool coat buttoned to his neck. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He waited. Tess nudged me. "Go. You dragged me here." She didn't argue. I walked up, held the pillowcase out because that's what you do, and said, "Trick or treat." He looked at me for a beat too long, turned, slipped inside, and came back with a long, narrow wooden box. Dust lay on it like flour. He held it out. I took it. It was heavier than it looked. The lid shifted and I caught a sliver of dark blue inside. "Thanks," I said, but the door had already eased closed. He was gone. Tess was already heading back down the track. "No jokes, no explanations. What is it?" I asked, catching up. She didn't answer. Halfway home, I slid the lid open. Inside lay a strip of deep blue cloth stitched with tiny white constellations. Stitches, not print. Careful work, warm under my fingers like someone had just been holding it. Under the cloth was a small lock of hair tied with twine. "Human hair," I stopped. "Tess, put it back," she said, still walking. "Don't talk till we're inside." Her voice left no room. I closed the lid and followed. Back at the house, she took the box with both hands and slid it under her bed. "Forget it," I tried. I couldn't. Around 1 a.m., I got up for water. The hallway was the kind of dark that makes you lose your place. The old TV in the living room, unplugged for years, was on. A low wash of static. I stared at it. For a second, the screen went black, and in the glass, I saw myself. And behind me, a second shape. Too close. I spun, nothing. When I looked back, the screen was dead. I locked the guest room door and lay awake until the sky went gray. In the morning, I told Tess. "You opened it?" she said. I nodded. "That wasn't a gift," she said quietly. "It's a trade. You take it and whatever's tied to it knows you. Knows me how. Knows where to find you," she said. "People used to bring things to the holler. Things they didn't want anymore. They'd wrap them pretty, leave hair, a name, a night on a piece of sky. The idea was the weight would go with the next hands. And the man hasn't been alive since the 80s. We left before noon. I told myself it was a country prank, a Halloween bit. That story was easier to carry. 2 nights later, I got home to my apartment in Roanoke and found my door standing open. Nothing missing. Drawers untouched. On the bed, perfectly flat, lay the same strip of star-stitched cloth. I didn't step inside. I backed away, locked the door, drove 3 blocks to a budget motel and checked in under my middle name. I called Tess from the parking lot. "It's here. Don't bring it back," she said. "Don't try to hand it off. Don't burn it. Don't cut it. Trades don't like being cheated. What do they want?" "To be even," she said, "and to be seen." I spent the next few nights in places that didn't feel like mine. Hotel, couch, another hotel. Each morning, the cloth was waiting where I couldn't miss it. On a chair, on the dresser, centered on a cheap bedspread like a place setting. I tried leaving it in the car. I tried a locker at the gym. I tried a storage unit off a frontage road. It kept beating me home. On the 4th day, I was too tired to be scared. I set it on the kitchen table and looked. The stitches weren't random. They were a map of a night. 1 bright point, a crooked ladder of 5, a scatter like salt. In one corner, a tiny red X I hadn't noticed before. The cloth warmed under my hands the longer I stared. "I see you," I said. Not sure if I was talking to the person who sewed it, or the thing that came with it, or the version of me who had opened the box. The apartment was quiet. The heater clicked. Down the hall, my phone buzzed with a message from Tess. A photo of her porch lantern burning steady in the afternoon. Glass smudged, flame holding. On Halloween night, I put a jar candle in my own window and watched it keep its little circle. No kids came by, no knocks. Sometime after midnight, the cloth vanished. I woke to an empty table and a silence that sounded like a room exhaling. It showed up again 2 weeks later, folded on the driver's seat, constellations bright as ever. I don't try to beat it anymore. When it wants to be seen, I look. When it's gone, I breathe. I keep a small lantern by my door now, not for light, but for company. If Tess asks how I'm doing, I tell her the truth, still here. My cousin Wren had lived her whole life in Pine Holler, a crease of a town tucked into the Blue Ridge, where maps squint and lose interest. She liked to say folks there were born facing the woods and never quite turned around. Late October, she texted, "Come up for Halloween, let's actually enjoy it for once." No punctuation, all nerve. That's Wren in Pine Holler. People hang pumpkins and string orange lights like everybody else. But once the sun drops, they move everything to the fellowship hall beside St. Ada's, eat chili, tap their feet to a radio station that barely comes in, and lock their doors by 10. They call it tradition. Wren calls it hiding. Her plan was the opposite of hiding. Light a fire at the old family cabin and make a night of it. No town rules, no worried glances, no early bedtime. I brought 2 friends from Knoxville, Mason, who can start a fire with damp bark and an argument about 90s guitar solos, and Chelsea, quiet and razor funny once you earn it. We reached the place just before dusk. The road peeled off gravel into 2 muddy ruts and ended at a log box with a sagging tin roof. No power, no plumbing. Wren had the stove going and 3 oil lanterns warming the walls to a honey color. A cooler sat by the hearth. A battery pack hummed under a Bluetooth speaker whispering old rock. It felt easy. We laughed. Passed cans burned our tongues on bad hot dogs cooked on sharpened sticks. Mason tripped over a stump and dumped beer into the woodpile, which became a joke that lasted half an hour. For a while, the cabin was exactly what Wren promised. Warm, simple, outside of everything. Close to 8, Mason stepped out to pee and came back different. Not scared exactly. Tight around the mouth. "Someone's down by the creek," he said. "Looks like a costume." "It's Halloween," Wren said without looking up. "Teenagers do dumb things." He nodded like he believed her, but he kept glancing at the window. I asked what he'd seen. "They stopped," he said. "Stayed still." Looking up here, it got quieter after that. No more music. The stove clinked when the logs settled. The lantern swung a little when the wind brushed the wall. Outside, the glass was just black with a hint of trees. Around 10, the chill sharpened. Chelsea pulled a blanket to her chin. Wren grabbed the poker and went to fetch more wood from the stack on the porch. She didn't come right back. I went to the door and found her standing still, eyes on the dark. "There's more," she said. 4. I stood beside her. At first I saw nothing, just a wash of trunks and brush. Then the clouds slid enough to give the moon a chance, and shapes took on edges down by the bend. 4 figures evenly spaced, shoulder to shoulder, not moving. The clothes were ordinary. Coats, loose pants, nothing dramatic. The faces weren't faces. They were blank ovals, paper, maybe plaster. White with hollows where the eyes should be and a single slit where a mouth might go. Not party store silly. Spare, wrong. "Inside," I said. Wren swallowed whatever she'd been about to say about the Haskins boys and followed. We bolted the door, turned the speaker off. Let the stove be our only light. The cabin settled into that small circle you get when flame is your whole world. We listened. A minute, 3. Then a sound that didn't belong. Wood complaining under weight, but not from the porch. From the back, we hadn't opened that door. There was only one way in. Wren lifted the poker. I took a lantern. The back room was colder by habit. It held a rope bed frame, a warped mirror, a trunk with a split lid. The air felt used. The mirror was fogged like a person had been breathing inches away. The single window was latched. No cracks, no wind. Just that damp circle on glass and our 2 faces like coins in a jar. Chelsea screamed. We ran. She was near the front window with her hand over her mouth. Someone stood on the porch now, inches beyond the glass. The mask in that person's hand had red slashes across where a mouth slit would be. Ragged lines. Not careful paint. Wet looking. The figure didn't wear the mask. It held it up as if to show us, like a sign tilted toward a driver. "Back room," I said. "We can shove the bed against the door and wait it out." Mason shook his head without looking at me. Saw one at the back window when you left. My skin went cold in a small, steady way. I carried the lantern to the back again. The latch still sat flat. The fog on the mirror had cleared into streaks. On the floorboards, muddy ovals, 5 little toes, bare feet pointing at the mirror and not away from it. The prints were dry around the edges like they'd been there a while. We hadn't been alone even before Mason went out to pee. We go now, I said. Leave the fire. Take the lantern that hisses. Don't look at them, we moved. Chelsea shoved the cooler against the front door as a decoy and pulled the blanket around her shoulders like it could make her invisible. Wren opened the back door slow. Air slid in, sharp and leaf wet. We slipped out and hugged the wall and then the trees. The lantern's wick stuttered. I cupped it and kept it alive until we were deep enough between trunks that our own light felt like a problem. I pinched it out. We took the long way to the road. Up slope in the dark, hands on bark, knees in mud, hearts heavy and exact. None of us spoke. When we broke onto gravel, it felt like surfacing. We stood there, breathing steam. Far back through the trees, the cabin held a little orange in the stove window. Something walked across that square of light, slower than a human would walk if the room were hot and the stove door open. We didn't wait to see if the square filled again. 40 minutes later, a pickup with a snowplow blade rolled up. The driver had a beard that made its own weather and a coat thick as a mattress. He saw 4 people on the shoulder in the middle of nowhere and didn't ask questions until we were halfway to town. Wren said thanks, like she was saying it to the night and not the man. We didn't go back the next morning. We didn't go back that week. Wren went with the constable a month later in daylight. The door was shut. The stove was cold. The mirror was cracked top to bottom like something had leaned its head there too hard. The bare prints had dried into the wood like stains. Nothing else was out of place. Our cooler sat where Chelsea had nudged it. The bed frame leaned as we'd left it. Whoever or whatever had stood on the porch left no marks on the boards. The mask wasn't there. People in Pine Holler still end their party early. No one says why. They call it tradition and ladle chili, and tell kids to grab an extra cupcake and be home by 9. Maybe they've forgotten. Maybe they remember perfectly and prefer different words. Wren doesn't bring up anti-Halloween anymore. If I ask, she shrugs and says we got too old to pretend we're the only ones out after dark. Mason will say he probably saw shadows and we got ourselves worked up. Chelsea will say nothing. But she keeps a blanket in her trunk year-round now, and a lantern that takes real fuel. I carry a small flashlight clipped inside my jacket, and use it even when there's a porch light. It's not superstition, it's a habit. Sometimes I dream about that red-slashed mask and wake to my own breath fogging the bedroom window. I wipe it clear with my sleeve and watch the glass go clean and plain. I tell myself it was just 4 people in thrift store coats doing a cruel thing. I tell myself they were only masks and silence. Then I remember the prints aimed at the mirror and not the door, and I turn on a lamp and wait for the room to look like mine again. I said yes because it sounded easy. Sit at the fairgrounds overnight. Lock the back gate. Keep an eye on the corn maze. Call if anything looks off. The field was dark, and the woods were louder than I remembered. A little after midnight, the pumpkins started showing up where they shouldn't. That's when the night changed. My name's Evan Price. I was back in Pine Hollow, West Virginia, for the fall of 2022 to fix up my uncle's old place off Mill Branch Road. I told myself I'd stay through Thanksgiving and decide after that. Maybe sell, maybe stay. It's the kind of town where people remember your face from 2nd grade, but forget you left 10 years ago. On Friday, Miss Deanna from the town committee cornered me in the grocery aisle and asked if I could babysit the Halloween grounds on Saturday night. She pressed a big yellow key into my hand before I even answered. "It's calm back there," she said. "Behind the school. You won't see a soul. Just lock up if you hear kids messing around." So I showed up Saturday with a thermos, a flashlight, and a phone that had 1 bar if I stood by the shed window. The fairgrounds sit in a shallow bowl. Ball field on one side, corn maze on the other, a swing set and a tired little pavilion in between. The only electric light is a single bulb over the utility shed door. Everything else is moon, stars, and whatever you bring. The volunteers wrapped by 10. We stacked tables, dragged a trash bag full of paper bats to the bin, and tied a rope across the maze entrance with a cardboard sign that said "Closed" in big red marker. The kids' pumpkin table under the pavilion had been my last job. 30 little jack-o'-lanterns carved earlier for the contest. We blew out the candles and set the pumpkins in a neat row so parents could grab their kids later. Then everyone waved, engines coughed, and taillights faded up the hill. By 11 it was only me, the shed, and a field of dark corn. The wind fell away. I heard my own jacket zipper when I moved. Somewhere a raccoon knocked a lid off a trash can and chirped at itself. I walked the fence with my flashlight. The padlocks were snug. The ball field gate was chained. The maze rope was tight. I went back to the shed, pulled the space heater close to my shins, and tried not to think about how long a night can feel when you've promised to stay until dawn. Around midnight, I stepped out for air. That's when I noticed the pumpkins. There were 4 of them glowing on the pavilion table. I was sure we'd blown them all out. I was the one who did it. But 4 sat there now, candles going, faces crooked and sweet. The kind kids carve when a parent's hand guides the knife. I walked over. The table was clean. No pulp, no seeds, no mess. Just 4 lit pumpkins in a row. It didn't make sense. Checked the bins. Nothing. The grass. Nothing. I told myself a parent must have come back and relit theirs, or I'd missed a few. It was easier to shrug than to think. I went back to the shed and killed the heater to save fuel. I poured coffee and watched the corn maze entrance through the little window. Wind ticked at the tin roof. The bulb hummed. For a long time, nothing happened. At 1:12 a.m., I checked. I heard steps on gravel, slow, not heavy. Just steady. I eased the shed light off and cracked the window. A tall shape stood by the swing set, turned toward the maze. It didn't move. It didn't fidget the way people do when they're waiting. It was like someone had set a cutout there and walked away. I watched for a minute, maybe 2, no change. When I blinked, it was still there, same angle, same tilt to the head. Then from the far side of the grounds came a dragging sound, long and even. Not metal, not a chain. More like something heavy pulled over dry grass. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It stopped under the pavilion and the light from the shed didn't reach that far. I kept still. 3 slow knocks came next. Not on the shed door, on the wall. The side opposite me. A careful knock, as if someone wanted me to hear but not the whole world. 3 taps, then quiet. I stayed where I was and counted to 60 twice. Nothing. I moved to the door, hand on the latch, and froze because I could hear children laughing outside. Not loud, not playing. That small, breathy giggle kids do when they're being sneaky. It came from near the maze. I opened the door and swept the flashlight across the grounds. The swing set was empty. The dragging sound was gone. The pavilion was empty too. If you don't count the way 4 small faces grinned from the table like they'd always been there. I walked to the maze entrance. The rope across it hung loose. The closed sign trampled into the dirt. 10 feet inside the first turn, a little pumpkin glowed on the ground. One of the 4 from the table, I thought. Same gouged smile, same lopsided eyes. I should have backed away. I went in. When my foot touched the shadow of the first row, the pumpkin ahead of me went out. 20 feet deeper, another lit up. I followed, out. A third winked on down a left fork. I followed that too. The path taught itself to my boots. Dirt, roots, the brush of dry leaves against my jeans. Another pumpkin. And another. Each one quiet as a held breath. Each going dark as I reached it. As if it wanted to be last in line behind me. The maze opened to a small clearing in the middle. We'd set a scarecrow there at dusk. A flannel shirt stuffed with straw, burlap head, corn husk hands tied to a crosspost. Paper bats had dangled from twine above it. There were no decorations now. No scarecrow. Just 6 children standing in a loose half circle. They didn't speak. They didn't rock on their heels or scratch a nose or look at each other. They wore old costumes, things you'd see in a faded photo. Paper masks with painted cheeks. Sackcloth capes. Felt ears stitched to knit caps. Their clothes clung wet to their arms and legs like they'd crawled through a creek bed. Mud crusted their cuffs. Their socks were bunched at their ankles, soaked all the way through. One pointed behind me. I turned. The scarecrow's clothes lay in a heap at the post. Straw scattered like pale hair. The crossbar was bare. The twine hung empty and still. A tall man stepped into the ring of the nearest pumpkin's light. I say man, but what reached my brain first was shape. He had the right outline. Too tall for the town teens. Too still for a drunk. He stood with his head tipped, not toward me, but toward the maze path I'd just left, as if listening to someone far away. When his head turned to me, it snapped. Not a smooth turn, not a shift. A snap, like a hinge that hadn't been oiled in years. That broke whatever spell I'd been under. I ran. The maze turned the way mazes do. Left when you expect right, right when you swear you took that corner already. Stalks slapped my arms. Dry tassels scratched my ears. I lost the flashlight and didn't stop to look for it. When I saw a sliver of sky low to the right, I shoulder dropped through a thin wall of corn and crashed out onto the grass. Breath tearing at my chest. At the shed, I fumbled the key, slammed the door and pushed the folding table against it. The heater cord bit my ankle. I turned off the bulb and leaned my back into the metal until I could hear my own blood. Silence, then soft feet on dirt. Then something dragged by the wall, slow and patient, like it knew I was on the other side of thin tin, and time was nothing. I texted 911. The message spun and failed. I tried again. Failed. One bar is a joke when the hills decide they don't like you. I stood there until my legs shook and the heater ran out, and the first pale hint of morning slid up behind the school. When the light came, it came all at once, the way it does in a valley. Birds started. A truck down on County Road 6 threw its gear. The world pretended the night had been normal. I opened the shed. The grounds were empty. The pavilion table was bare. No pumpkins. No wax on the wood. The closed sign lay face down in the dirt with fresh shoe prints over the letters. Child small, bare. The maze paths looked trampled by small feet, all pointing in and none pointing out. At the center clearing, the scarecrow was back. Shirt on the post, burlap head tied to the stick. But the shirt was inside out and the head was crooked, the knot tied too low. Like someone who had seen a scarecrow once had tried to copy it and got bored halfway through. I didn't wait for Misty Anna. I didn't stay for sunrise coffee with the volunteers. I locked the shed, drove straight to my uncle's place, and hauled my bags to the truck. By noon, I was on the highway headed west. I tell myself a lot of simple things when my brain starts looping that night. I tell myself kids from town got clever and staged a scare. I tell myself someone found a way through the fence and planted the pumpkins and the prints. I tell myself the tall shape by the swings was a shadow from the floodlight that isn't there. The easy story should help. It doesn't, because sometimes when I wake up right before dawn, I hear that dragging sound again, slow and steady, like something heavy pulled over dry grass. And in my head I see 6 small figures in old masks staring at a pile of clothes on a post, while a tall shape listens for footsteps in a maze. If Misty Anna calls again next year and asks if I can babysit, I'll let it ring. Someone else can hold the yellow key, watch the rope, count the pumpkins. I'm done with the night in Pine Hollow. The maze can keep whatever it was looking for. My sister, Mara, moved to Laurel Notch 4 years ago for cheaper rent, quieter nights, and a yard big enough for a dog. I kept saying I'd come up for a weekend and fix the loose railing on her back steps. I never did. Then my niece Junie turned 6 and called me from Mara's phone 2 weeks before Halloween. Will you come trick-or-treat with me? Please, that was that. I took Friday off, packed a duffel, and drove up from Charleston. Interstate to 2-lane, 2-lane to 1-lane, 1-lane to gravel. Cell signal died somewhere after a billboard for Fresh Peaches exit 12, which felt like a joke, because there was no exit and no peaches. Laurel Notch isn't a postcard kind of town. One blinking light, a brick post office the size of a shed, a diner that closes at 5 on the dot. People wave from their porches, but they also look a half second too long at your plates. Friendly, just measured. We set up a folding table outside the volunteer fire station. Really a single bay garage with faded red paint and a siren on top that probably hadn't worked since before I was born. Mara poured paper cups of hot cider from a big silver urn. I handed out homemade donuts she'd fried the night before and bagged with wax paper so they wouldn't stick. Junie wore a bat costume with stiff felt wings and plastic fangs that made her drool when she talked. She sprinted between our table and the hay wagon, doing slow loops on the gravel roads, picking up kids who lived way out. High schoolers in hoodies walked behind the wagon with flashlights like they were Secret Service for 7-year-olds. It was the kind of small you either love or escape from. That night, I almost loved it. Near 9, most of the little kids had been marched home. The wagon did one last lap and parked beside the church across the road. We were folding tables when a man I didn't recognize walked up. He didn't look like a tourist. Not dirty, not clean, just worn. Light hair tied back, windburned face, coat a size too big. He didn't smile, didn't offer a name. He nodded once like we'd met before. "You staying up at Mara Latham's?" he asked. I blinked. "Yeah." He glanced toward the tree line behind the church. "If you hear knocking tonight," he said, voice as calm as a weather report, "don't open the door," that was all. He turned and crossed the gravel. The dark took him in 3 steps. I waited for a wink, a grin, a just kidding. Nothing. I asked Mara who he was. She shook her head. "I've never seen him," she said. "In a town that size, that meant something." We finished packing. The last porch lights clicked off along Main Street. We drove out Cedar Fork Road, where the trees crowd the shoulders and the branches tick your mirrors if you drift. Mara's cabin sits near the end, tucked above a hollow, 2 bedrooms, wood stove, and a kitchen that opens into the living room. The motion light over the back steps was flaky. She'd mentioned it. I promised again to fix it in the morning. "Couch okay?" she asked. "Perfect." Buck, her dog, a lab mix with mismatched ears, did a figure 8 around us and thumped onto the rug by the stove. Mara kissed Junie goodnight. I stayed up a little longer with a second cup of cider, scrolling videos I didn't really watch. The stove settled and popped. The house got that late-night quiet where you hear your own throat when you swallow. Sometime after midnight, it came. 3 soft knocks at the back door. Even patient, not loud, just certain. I froze, listening for footsteps, voices, a car on the gravel. Nothing. I got up, careful not to step on Buck's tail, and walked to the kitchen. The switch for the floodlight did nothing. The bulb had died. Through the glass, only trees and my own face. I checked the deadbolt, set. I stood there a minute longer, waiting for reason to show up. It didn't. I sat back down. At 1:20, the sound moved. A slow scrape across the front porch boards, then 3 firmer knocks on the front door. Buck stood, tail low, ears pinned. Not a bark, not a growl, just a posture that said, "Don't." I lifted the curtain with 1 finger. The porch was empty. No sway of shadows. No breath on the glass. The scrape and the knocks didn't match the wind. They sounded like choice, not weather. Then it started moving around the house. Side wall, kitchen window, the little hatch to the crawl space under the laundry. Each time the same rhythm, 3. Quiet in between, like someone ticking boxes on a list. I didn't wake Mara. I told myself a teen could have slipped out. Some older kid trying out a dumb tradition. I told myself a lot of things. Between the knocks, the silence felt heavier than the noise. The whole run lasted maybe an hour. It stopped at 2:40 like a timer had gone off. I stood there a while with my hand on the hammer drawer and finally laughed at myself, which sounded wrong in the empty room. I poured water, sat back on the couch. Buck lay down, head on his paws, eyes open. At 3:19, a fingernail tap on the kitchen glass behind me. I turned. Something was pressed to the window, face close to human. Not quite. The forehead was too high, the eyes a touch too far apart, the jaw too long and narrow, like a mask that didn't fit the mold. The skin looked like candle wax, thin enough to show the dark like bruises beneath. The mouth hung open, not unhinged, just wrong, like the idea of a mouth drawn by someone who'd never used one. It didn't fog the glass. It didn't blink. It didn't move. I didn't breathe because it felt like if I exhaled, it would notice. I don't know how long we stood there. A beat, a minute, a lifetime. Then the hall light snapped on, Mara up for water, and the window was bare. Not ducked away. Just not there anymore, like something peeled a sticker and took it clean. Mara found me with both hands on the counter. "What's wrong?" "Someone was at the window," I said. It sounded thin when I said it out loud. She looked past me at the glass, looked at Buck, who was still statue still. She swallowed. "Stay here." We checked the doors together. Deadbolt still set. No footprints on the frost of the steps. The floodlight bulb was indeed burned out. She called the county deputies. They said they'd come by in the morning unless it escalated. It won't, I said. I didn't know that. I slept 0. Mara got an hour on the recliner. Buck never fully lay down. Junie slept through the whole thing because kids can sleep through the apocalypse if you don't tell them it's happening. In the morning, 2 deputies came. New guy and a woman older than both of us. Probably a trespasser, the new one said. Like reading off a card. Maybe someone had a little too much last night. Doing laps around the house to knock politely? I asked. He didn't smile. He did a slow walk in the yard. Came back with his hands empty. No pry marks, no prints. Nothing missing. Replace that bulb. Get a camera if it makes you feel better. If it happens again, try to get a photo. Sure, I said, picturing myself lifting my phone while that pale face pressed closer for a better angle. They left a card on the counter and a dusting of grit on the mat. Later, a neighbor, Eldon Pike, swung by with a load of firewood in his truck like he'd meant to anyway. 60-something, ropey strong, face cut by weather. Mara asked if he'd heard anything the night before. He didn't answer that. He nodded toward the back door instead. Lights out, he said. Will you get a new bulb in before tonight? I will, I said. We told him about the knocks. About the face. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look much of anything. He rolled a log from one hand to the other and said, shows up some years. Mostly Halloween. Sometimes the week after. Don't open up, no matter what it says. What it says? I asked. He lifted another log. You'll know it if you hear it. That was the part I kept chewing all day while I swapped the bulb, while I fixed the loose rail, while Mara made grilled cheese for Junie and me. I listened for normal sounds. The mail truck, a chainsaw 2 ridges over, wind in the poplars, and thought about voices pressed against glass. We didn't stay another night. Mara said it was fine, really, but she didn't fight me when I said I'd head back down the mountain before dark. Junie hugged me like nothing bad ever happened anywhere. On the drive, the radio came back in, and I let some talk show I didn't care about fill the car. I told myself 100 reasons for what I'd seen. I believed none of them all the way. Now when October rolls around, something in me wakes at 3:19. Habit or heartbeat. I lie there and listen to a quiet house. Most nights it's only the ice maker. The neighbor's cat on the porch, the world being boring. Some nights, in the space between the heater kicking on and the refrigerator settling, I remember 3 careful knocks from the door I'm not facing. I do not answer. I planned to stay home. Then Myron knocked, already in costume, and said the church was doing games and donuts. I grabbed a hoodie. 16 isn't too old for free donuts. The church sat where the blacktop gave up and the gravel began. A white rectangle with a crooked bell and a rec room that always smelled like coffee and pine sol. They called it Harvest Night instead of Halloween. Crockpots lined the folding tables. Someone strung orange bulbs across the ceiling and taped paper leaves to the walls. Little kids bobbed for apples with their sleeves rolled up past their elbows. Teenagers leaned against the soda cooler, pretending not to be there. Mirren had gone all in. Long dress, apron, bonnet, the whole pioneer for a night thing. I'd put on an orange sweatshirt and told people I was a traffic cone. It got 1 laugh. Good enough. By 8, the dads were breaking down hay bales into a photo backdrop, and moms were herding sugar-drunk kids toward minivans. Out back, the field sloped into a thin line of woods. A gravel lane cut past the dumpsters and kept going, disappearing between trees toward a handful of houses where porch lights were the only stars at ground level. Mirren patted her pocket, frowned and said she'd lost her phone. Probably by the hay bales, she said. I borrowed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and followed her outside. The night had that hollow quiet you get in late October. Crisp air, breath you can see, sound falling straight down. We checked the straw, then the picnic benches, then the patch of grass where the toddlers had lined up for ring toss. Nothing. Mirren glanced toward the lane. We walked up there earlier, she said. Just a little ways. Maybe it slipped out. We told ourselves we'd go 50 steps and turn back. The church music, kids' songs sliding into old hymns thinned with every crunch of gravel. Our light made a shaky tunnel. The trees crowded closer. I saw it first. A pale oval between trunks higher than a person's head. For a second I thought it was a plastic grocery bag snagged in a branch. Then the flashlight caught the shape under it, a long, straight figure still as fence post facing us. The white wasn't a bag. It was a face, or something worn over a face. "Marin," I said, just above a whisper. "I see it," she breathed. We stood there listening to our own breathing, the lamp hum from the church so thin it barely counted. I called out, "Hello?" because that's what you do when you're not sure if you should run. The figure slid a step behind a tree, not fast, like it had all the time in the world. We didn't discuss it. We walked back the way we'd come, not running, not turning our backs fully, the beam bouncing off stone and weed heads. The rec room door glowed like a landing strip. Inside, the light felt sticky and ordinary. Myron found her phone in the lining of her coat 10 minutes later, of course. I let the joke die on purpose. I figured that was the end of the weird. A kid from youth group, tall, always pretending he knew a shortcut, rounded up a handful of us for flashlight tag at the old bus lot down the lane. "It's not far," he said. "We'll be back in 20. Myron wanted to go. I didn't, but I also didn't want to listen to her talk about how I never did anything. So we climbed into the back of a pickup with 4 others and rattled toward the dark. The bus lot was a clearing where the county used to park school buses. 3 dead ones were still there, tires melted into earth, windows gone. A sapling growing through one roof. The weeds came to my knees. The air smelled like rust and mice. Everybody clicked on their phone lights and declared teams. I stuck with Myron. We hadn't played 5 minutes when someone whispered my name from the shadow behind a bus. Not shouted, whispered, drawn out, almost careful, like they were trying to get the weight of each letter right. Morgan. My light jumped. Myron was 3 steps to my left. I swung the beam. Nothing. The others were half visible, half cut into strips by the buses. Bright faces, dark legs. Laughter in the wrong places. Morgan. Same voice. Same soft rehearsal of syllables. Then a beat later. "Myron," she grabbed my sleeve. "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," I said. "We're going." She didn't argue. We pushed through the weeds, past a tire sunk so deep only the rim showed, and found the pickup. The driver saw our faces and didn't make a joke. He yelled for the others. Nobody argued with the idea of leaving. On the ride back, nobody said cool or creepy. We watched the tree line and tried not to look at the space between trees. At the rec room, we went straight to the pastor. He'd been stacking chairs and was dusty with hay chaff. We started in on the story and he held up a hand. "White mask?" he asked. "Near the woods?" We stopped. "How did you—" A little one said a tall man followed her to the porta-john, he said, quiet. Whispered her name in a robot voice. Her mom thought she was telling tales. Then she found Prince behind the unit. Not little, he didn't smile. He didn't say kids. He walked to the door and locked it, then asked one of the deacons to walk families to their cars. Harvest night ended early. We helped coil extension cords in silence. Myron wiped cider off a table like she could scrub the whole evening clean. When we carried trash out back, I glanced down the lane. The flashlight I'd borrowed cut a weak cone over the gravel, then got swallowed whole by the trees. Nothing moved. Nothing had to. We slept badly at Myron's house, which creaked like a ship in heavy weather. Every knock sounded like knuckles. I told myself it was the wood stove cooling and the dog switching sides in his sleep. At 2:13, something tapped the window over the sink. 3 soft, spaced knocks. The dog lifted his head and didn't bark. I didn't tell Myron until morning. She said, "Don't open anything when you hear 3. Like it was a rule she'd always known but hadn't remembered until then. I asked where she'd heard that. She said, "Granddad," and left it there. We stopped by the church before school to return the flashlight and found the pastor on the steps with a set of pliers, fixing a loose hinge. He looked like he hadn't slept. He told us the board decided not to do harvest night next year. Too many people in one place, he said, which was a reason that didn't answer the question. On the way out, the girl who'd told her mom about the tall man was coloring at a pew with a broken crayon. She waved with the kind of total trust only 6-year-olds have. I waved back and tried to make my face say, "You're fine." I didn't know if it was true. A week later, a rumor ran through the hallways. Some hunter found big footprints by the creek beyond the bus lot. Not boots, bear. The kind of rumor that grows details the longer it walks. I pretended not to listen. I also stopped taking the lane alone, even in daylight. If Myron noticed, she didn't tease me for it. I wanted a clean ending. Footage on a phone, somebody in a costume unmasked, a laugh, a shrug. We didn't get one. What we got was a white oval that slid out of a beam, and a voice that tried our names like it had all night to practice. What we got was a pastor who locked the door and didn't tell us we imagined it. Sometimes in the kitchen late, I open the drawer where Mom keeps the dish towels and the flashlight lives now. I don't turn it on. I just make sure it's there. People love to say it was probably nothing, and maybe that helps them sleep. I don't say that anymore. Out by the bus lot, something stood where we were, learned the shape of our names and waited to see if we'd follow. We didn't. I don't plan to. And if 3 soft knocks ever come again, I don't care who says my name, I'm not opening the door. By 2017, the harvest night at Cedar Run Chapel felt like a ritual as steady as the seasons. Same hand-painted arrows along County Road 19, same folding tables borrowed from the fire hall, same crock pots labeled with masking tape. My Aunt Dell had been on the team since before I was born, which meant my cousin Tessa and I were drafted every year to haul boxes and untangle last year's knotted strings of plastic bats. Friday landed warm and clear. The chapel's basement, low-ceiling orange bulbs zigzagged between beams, filled fast. Toddlers waddled past in sewn-at-home costumes. Teenagers pretended to be bored while winning candy bars. And the chili cook-off judges took themselves a little too seriously. Pastor Keene did his usual half-smile from the doorway, the kind that says he's not sure about Halloween, but he's sure about keeping everyone in one lit room. Tessa and I ran the ring toss until our palms were sticky. I was gnawing a questionable licorice rope when Aunt Dell swept up in her witch getup. Green face paint, thrift store cloak, glitter everywhere. She bent to Tessa first, whispered something I couldn't catch, then looked me dead in the eye. "Go downstairs." "Stay there," she said, voice low and even. "If you hear anything, you do not open that door unless it's me." I laughed, because that's what you do when a grown-up suddenly sounds deadly serious, but she didn't laugh back. Tessa grabbed my sleeve. We cut through the coat racks, down the back stairs, and into the storage room behind the boiler. It was a narrow rectangle with metal shelves, holiday tubs, and a single high slit of a window painted cloudy by years of dust. Tessa flicked off the light, dragged a dented filing cabinet across the concrete, and levered it against the door. The metal feet squealed. She winced, then sank cross-legged to the floor and clicked on a small flashlight, keeping the beam low. "What's going on?" I whispered. She shook her head once. "Not now." Upstairs the noise thinned. Laughter receded. Music cut mid-song, a microphone thumped and died. The hush that followed wasn't just quiet. It had weight. A minute later, maybe 2, we heard the basement door tuck itself shut. Not slammed, clicked. Tessa's thumb tightened on the light. She passed me the candy leftovers like a peace offering. I peeled a tiny chocolate just to have something to do with my hands. The wrapper crackled like a gunshot. We both froze, footsteps above us. Not hurrying, not heavy. Each one placed. Then the slow settle of wood. Whoever it was avoided the creaky spots the way only someone who knew the room would. The steps crossed the main hall, found the basement stairs, started down. The cadence was wrong for a kid in sneakers and wrong for a farmer in boots. Too soft, too steady. On the other side of our door, something eased forward until the cabinet pinged against metal. 3 knocks. They weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Each one lifted the cabinet a hair and let it settle. Then a voice spoke, level and conversational, like it was telling us about the weather. You forgot to latch it. It wasn't Aunt Dell. It wasn't anyone I could place. The words were ordinary, the tone was not. It felt like it had practiced. Tessa slid her hand over mine and squeezed until my knuckles hurt. We were both shaking, but I couldn't tell whose tremor belonged to whom. The thing, person, didn't rattle the handle. It didn't test the edges. It waited. Long enough for my knees to cramp and the flashlight to dim to a bruise of light. When it finally moved away, we tracked the steps back up the stairs, across the hall, and then nothing. Silence pooled so deep it felt like water. Time turned rubbery. I counted to 100. I started over. The flashlight died. Neither of us risked turning on the overhead. We breathed and tried not to breathe, flinching at the settling ticks of old pipes, imagining more that we hoped we imagined. Eventually, the word doesn't fit. It could have been 20 minutes or 2 hours. The upstairs lock turned again. This time we heard a single knock, sharp and quick, in Aunt Dell's voice. "It's me." Tessa and I heaved the cabinet aside. Aunt Dell stood there under the stairwell light, makeup smeared to a sickly gray, hat gone, cloak askew. She looked older than she had at sunset. "Come on," she said. "No talking yet." We climbed to a room that looked like a party frozen mid-exhale. Streamers fluttered in a draft. A stack of paper cups lay scattered. One of the long tables had snapped clean across its center with no weight on it. The puppet stage curtain sagged like something had pressed its face against it and then let go. No one else remained. Out in the gravel lot, the wind had picked up. A single candy wrapper chased itself in circles like it wanted a do-over. Aunt Dell locked the doors, checked them twice, then hustled us into her Suburban without turning off the dome light. At home, she made tea she didn't drink and drew every curtain. Only then did she sit and tell it straight. "Sometimes," she said, eyes on the window instead of us, "something that isn't from here tries to be here." "In town?" I asked. "In the ridge. In houses. In the school once. In the old post office. In the chapel tonight." She rubbed a green smear from her cheek with the heel of her hand. "It shows up when we gather. It doesn't like noise. It doesn't like light. It likes doors." "What is it?" Tessa asked. "I don't name it," Aunt Dell said. "Names make things stay. It doesn't talk most years. If there are children, sometimes it copies a word or two, something it heard. Enough to make a hand reach for a latch." I heard the sentence again in my head. "You forgot to latch it," and felt the hook I hadn't seen at the time. "What happens if you open the door?" I asked, because I had to. She looked at me the way people look at road flares, bright and terrible, and didn't answer. We slept in the living room with the lamps on. The house made its usual winter noises, and each one sounded new and wrong. When I finally dozed, I dreamed of a hand I couldn't see pressing against a door I couldn't name. The chapel didn't put up flyers the next October. Pastor Keene told the congregation harvest night was on pause, and no one argued. People did their own quiet things at home. Porch lights all on, curtains open, every door double-checked. The kids pouted, and then accepted it. The way kids accept anything adults do the same way every year. Now and then, someone at the diner would say they'd heard tapping at a side window around midnight, or a soft voice in the hall that stopped when they stood up. Folks would make a joke and change the subject. Aunt Dell stopped laughing at those jokes. There are still boxes of plastic bats in the chapel storage room. If you went down there in daylight, you'd think we'd imagined it all. Dust, labels curling at the corners, a filing cabinet with a scuff where it used to sit. You could crack the high window and hear the pines hiss on the hill, and tell yourself the rest was nerves. I told myself that for a while. Then, one night the next spring, a storm knocked out the power. I stood in the kitchen holding a flashlight, listening to the house breathe, and somewhere out back beneath the rain, I swore I heard 3 soft knocks spaced like a heartbeat. I didn't open anything. We don't call it a haunting. That word would make it too tidy. It's simpler and stranger than that. Something learned a sentence and came looking for the hinge in us the sentence fits. Every year Aunt Dell reminds me of the rule, even when I roll my eyes at it. Locks first. Lights on. If a voice at the door sounds almost like someone you love and says something ordinary, like you forgot to, latch it. You keep your hands at your sides and wait for the person you love to say your name the way only they ever do.